Canada, a country 9 times smaller than the United States, is quietly causing America's biggest restaurant chains to fall down, one by one. Applebees lost more than 400 locations, Red Lobster shut down 120 stores, and more than 500 Duncan places across border states have disappeared in just 2 years. The collapse hit every corner of daily life, because now the familiar, affordable meals we count on for generations are being erased by something really unexpected. Could the silent breakup from Canada really paralyze many US giants like that? And if other countries follow Canada's step, what's the future of America waiting for us now? This is the Downturn Report, where the truth gets personal. And today, we discovered 10 big restaurant chains will collapse because of Canada's boycott. Stick with us, because number 3 will make you feel sad about the good old days that never come back again. Number 1, Applebees. Could you imagine a country smaller than 1/10 America size is quietly causing our lifelong affordable meal to the verge of extinction? We are talking about what just happened when Canada decided not to support Applebees anymore. And maybe it shocked everyone because Applebees wasn't just a small restaurant. For decades, it was the second dining room of the American middle class. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, it reached over 2,000 locations across the US, thriving as the go-to place for affordable steaks, family birthdays, and weekend night comfort after a long week. And it wasn't just Americans. Every weekend, thousands of Canadians drove across the border to fill their carts at Walmart and settle into a booth at Applebees in many states. Border locations relied on Canadian customers for up to 30% of weekend revenue. According to a 2018 Technomic study, we used to have a close, familiar, and steady relationship, but now it's all gone. By the end of 2024, Applebee's had shrunk to just 1,586 restaurants nationwide, a loss of over 400 since 2015. In a recent earnings call, Dine Brands CEO John Payton admitted more closures are inevitable, especially across border states. In private reports leaked in early 2025, internal projections warned that some northern towns may lose their only Applebee's by year's end. Citing a sharp and permanent drop in Canadian foot traffic, this wasn't an accident, but a silent retreat. In the past 2 years, the Canadian dollar lost over 10% of its value against the US dollar. Gas prices soared. Cross-border travel rules remained rigid. But the most damaging blow is a moral problem that Canadians couldn't forgive. In 2022, a leaked email from a regional Applebee's executive suggested that inflation would benefit the company by forcing people to accept lower-paying jobs. The tone struck a nerve, especially in Canada, where labor dignity is held close. Many quietly shook their heads and walked away. The effects are now showing up in the lives of ordinary Americans. Servers who worked there for over a decade found themselves suddenly jobless. In towns where choices are few, the disappearance of Applebee's means families can no longer go out without going far. The elderly are now stuck at home. For parents, it means one less affordable option when there's no time to cook. The fallout is not just economic, but touching every corner of residents' daily life. And as Canadian chains like Swiss Chalet and Boston Pizza step in, offering cheaper meals with stable quality, Applebee's begins to feel like a memory rather than a presence. The Canadian public, without protest or fanfare, simply redirected their loyalty. Perhaps not every Canadian intended to sever the bond, but when enough people walk away in silence, the damage is just as deep. What happens when they never come back? Keep watching because number 2 is even worse. Number 2, Olive Garden. The place that once held memories of our good old days is quietly faded, because Canadians already walked away from us. And gone with them is a part of America that generations still hold on to, for millions of middle-class families. Olive Garden wasn't just a restaurant, but more like an event. With over 850 locations at its peak, it offered Italian ambiance at American prices. The unlimited soup and breadsticks were part of a habit many families came to count on. And for Canadian tourists, it was the perfect end to a shopping trip, with familiar setting, affordable menu, and no tipping anxiety. In fact, locations in states like Vermont, Michigan, and New York saw surges of cross-border visitors every weekend. Between 2015 and 2019, up to 1 in 4 customers during peak weekend hours were Canadian, according to internal Dine Brands reports. But starting in 2022, that steady presence began to vanish. By mid-2024, several northern Olive Garden locations had shuttered quietly after Canadian foot traffic dropped by nearly 30%, particularly after fuel costs rose and the Canadian dollar dropped. But the tipping point came in early 2023 when news broke that former Darden CEO Gene Lee, who once oversaw Olive Garden, had received more than $11 million in stock compensation. Meanwhile, thousands of part-time workers across the chain were being laid off. The optics of corporate excess amid workforce cuts sparked backlash across Canada. A viral hashtag, #DropDarden, trended on Twitter for days, and forums like Reddit Canada were flooded with users expressing disgust at the brand's disconnected values. And so, Canada stopped showing up. Now, the fallout is echoing through American communities. Retired people no longer have a place to meet. Low-income people working part-time have been left scrambling after the closure of the only restaurant hiring near their town. Students looking for weekend hours and seniors supplementing fixed incomes are watching those opportunities dry up. Meanwhile, Canadian chains like Eastside Mario's and Moxie's are gaining ground, with vibrant interiors, updated service models, and pasta dishes at 20 to 25% less than Olive Garden's menu. They're filling the gap. And more importantly, they feel local. One Canadian Redditor wrote, "Why drive 3 hours for frozen ravioli and fake Tuscan walls when I can eat real pasta down the street and support someone I know?" What happens next may be even more troubling. If Canada continues this quiet withdrawal, Olive Garden could lose up to 80 more US locations by the end of 2025, according to Dine Brand's internal forecasts. And if countries like the UK or Australia follow Canada, begin favoring domestic alternatives post-trade tensions, the international future of Olive Garden could be wiped off the map before 2026. And as we move forward, another name long stitched into American memory begins to quietly disappear. Number 3, IHOP. With fewer Canadians customers, a Sunday breakfast that once united generations is now slipping off the map for more than 65 years. IHOP has been a fixture in American life. It was a morning tradition. Families in every corner of the country knew that Blue Roof meant eggs hot off the griddle and laughter over bottomless coffee at its peak. IHOP operated over 1,600 restaurants across the U.S., becoming a symbol of the affordable American breakfast. But in 2025, something unexpected was happening. In many towns, Canadian travelers once made up 10 to 20% of weekend traffic at nearby IHOPs. These visitors came for cheap prices, warm service, and the kind of predictable comfort they couldn't find back home. That quiet stream has dried up. Since 2022, IHOP has shuttered at least 60 locations in states with high Canadian traffic, including Minnesota, North Dakota, and New Hampshire. One by one, branches disappeared with just a locked door and a faded sign. Behind the scenes, food prices soared. Egg costs jumped by 51% between 2021 and 2023. A meal that cost $7.99 in 2018 now nears $15 before tax and tip. For many working-class Canadians, that turned a casual brunch into a financial burden, but price was only part of the problem. Add to that stricter post-COVID border rules, skyrocketing gas costs, and a rising loyalty to homegrown Canadian brands, and IHOP began to lose its weekend pilgrims. Chains like Cora Breakfast and Lunch and Eggsmart now dominate with fresh menus, fast service, and prices 20 to 25% lower than IHOP. Meanwhile, Canadians began openly criticizing IHOP online. TikTok videos and Reddit threads from 2023 called out long wait times, lukewarm pancakes, and coffee that tastes like hot water. The human cost is easy to overlook, but impossible to ignore. Servers and part-time cooks, mostly single mothers, students, and seasonal workers have been laid off without warning. If Canada continues this silent boycott, Dine Brands may be forced to close another 100 IHOPs by 2026. Prices will rise again, combo deals will vanish, and the chain's once accessible charm may crumble under its own costs. And if countries like the UK or Mexico mirror Canada's behavior, IHOP could face a revenue crisis it's not equipped to survive. Today, Canadian families enjoy their breakfast at Cora or Eggsmart, restaurants that feel local, honest, and fresh. Meanwhile, the Blue Roof diners of America stand a little quieter. The question isn't just whether Canadians will come back, it's whether IHOP can still offer something worth crossing a border for. Number 4, Red Lobster. The place you once saved for special occasions is now going dark. Its empty chairs a quiet reminder that even tradition can be abandoned. For decades. Red Lobster was the affordable taste of luxury. It wasn't fast food, but it wasn't unreachable either. With over 700 global locations, it gave working-class families a place to mark birthdays, anniversaries, and milestones without breaking the bank. In northern U.S. states, it drew cross-border diners who came seeking fresh seafood at half the Canadian price. By 2015, weekend traffic from those visitors accounted for more than 12% of Red Lobster's business in key regions, according to Restaurant Business. But by May 2024, that shine had faded. Red Lobster filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy after reporting losses nearing $11 million in a single quarter. Within 6 months, 99 restaurants had closed, many of them in communities that had built memories within those walls. In places like Michigan, New York, and Vermont, familiar storefronts now sit vacant. The collapse wasn't loud, it came quietly, through years of dwindling tourism and mounting costs. A weakening foreign exchange rate turned what used to be a treat into a financial stretch. And then came the scandal. In 2023, Red Lobster's CEO was criticized for approving the Endless Shrimp campaign, a decision that drove heavy financial losses. Canadian media mocked the strategy as a buffet built on a black hole. The consequences landed hard. Thousands of service workers, many single mothers, immigrants, and retirees were left without warning. Elderly couples who once returned every month for a shared seafood platter now find the lights off, and in rural towns, the only accessible seafood option disappeared. Now, domestic competitors are thriving, and that empty plate on the table. It says more than any press release ever could. Number 5, Dennys. A place that once welcomed everyone at any hour is now locking its doors, silently vanishing from towns that depended on its light for generations. Dennys was more than a restaurant. It was where night shift workers refueled, families gathered after church, and travelers found warmth during long highway drives. By 2018, the chain operated over 1,700 U.S. locations, hundreds near the northern border, serving both Americans and cross-border visitors alike. In regions like Niagara Falls and Seattle, it was common to see a line of Canadians waiting for pancakes and bottomless coffee. According to Canadian Tourism Commission data, nearly 17% of all short U.S. trips in 2019 involved meals at chains like Dennys. That warmth has faded. Between 2020 and 2024, Dennys quietly shuttered more than 150 restaurants, with the hardest hits in states once favored by Canadian travelers. A 2023 report from the Motley Fool revealed a 19% drop in breakfast visits nationwide, but at border locations, the plunge reached 27%. The iconic Grand Slam breakfast, once priced at $6.99, now costs over $13, pushing many customers away. The deeper damage comes from perception. After a 2022 viral video showed undercooked food and unsanitary conditions at a main location, trust took a hit. Online backlash in Canada painted the brand as outdated and careless. The once familiar slogan, "America's Diner is always open," now feels like a distant echo. And for Americans, the loss is personal. Retirees, truckers, and night shift workers in towns like Bellingham or Plattsburgh now face shuttered storefronts. Some communities are left without a single 24/7 diner. Workers, especially single parents and overnight staff, were left jobless with no local alternatives. As domestic competitors in Canada rise, Dennys becomes a fading landmark of a slower, more predictable time. And in the middle of the night, for many, there's nowhere left to go. Number 6, Buffalo Wild Wings. There used to be a roar every weekend now. The silence hits harder than any final buzzer. Buffalo Wild Wings wasn't just a place to eat, it was a stadium without a roof. In its prime, the chain had over 1,200 locations, many lining the northern states like Michigan and New York, drawing in floods of sports fans every game day. NFL, NBA, UFC, every major event brought people together. Entire tables booked out a week in advance, especially in border cities, just for the Super Bowl buzz. But from 2021 to 2024, the roar began to fade. Over 100 BWW locations shut down, especially in towns like Spokane, Buffalo, and Detroit. Inspire Brands' Q2 2023 report noted an 11% revenue drop near the border. And perhaps more telling, Canadian visitor traffic dropped 35%. Fans took to Reddit to vent loud, overpriced, chaotic, and no longer welcoming. What changed? The price of wings nearly doubled, from 89 cents to $1.79 apiece. Cold beer spiked 35% post-pandemic, while American menus got steeper. Canada built its own answer. The Canadian Brewhouse, Boston Pizza, and St. Louis Bar and Grill now offer sports, food, and crowd energy without border hassles or sticker shock. Then came the scandals. In 2023, a viral TikTok video showed staff at an Ohio BWW ignoring Asian patrons during a game. The incident spread outrage through Canada's diverse communities. Other complaints followed: dirty kitchens, staff turnover, indifferent service, especially near the border, where wages were low and morale even lower. Now, in border towns, the screens still flicker on weekends, but the crowds are gone. Workers, especially students and weekend staff, lost income. The spirit, the shared pulse of game night is slipping into memory. And maybe the most painful part, the culture of sports, once shared so easily, is beginning to fracture, quietly, and perhaps permanently. Number 7, Duncan. The light's still on, but no one's coming in, and even the coffee doesn't smell like it used to. For decades, Duncan was the quiet heartbeat of the border morning rush. From Quebec to Ontario, thousands of Canadians made the short drive into upstate New York or Vermont just for a cup of coffee and a box of donuts. At its peak, with over 11,000 locations worldwide, Duncan became the aroma of early Saturday drives and road trip rituals. "I used to cross the border just for Duncan and Target," one older Canadian once said. Now, no reason left. By 2024, the story changed. Duncan had completely withdrawn from the Canadian market after failing to compete with homegrown coffee brands. Across key border states, revenue dropped more than 20% compared to pre-pandemic levels, especially on major Canadian holidays like Victoria Day. Once reliable for sales spikes, customers didn't just stop coming, they stopped caring. Why? The taste stopped connecting. A 2023 Canadian grocer survey found 74% of Canadians preferred buying coffee from domestic brands, while only 3% even remembered Duncan as an option. The flavor was labeled bland and artificial, donuts described as rubbery, and prices steadily rose. People began to say aloud what they once whispered, "Why drive for coffee? I wouldn't even drink at home." Then came the scandals. In 2023, Duncan faced accusations of underpaying staff, firing older workers, and using low-grade ingredients in their baked goods. A viral TikTok, with over 3 million views, exposed their eggs as frozen, powdered blends. For Canadians, where food transparency is deeply valued, trust evaporated overnight. Now early mornings at border town Duncans are eerily still. Retirees have lost their coffee hub. Single moms lost part-time income. Students no longer have that first job. Cafes stay lit, but the windows reflect only emptiness. And if other countries follow Canada's quiet exit, how many American brands will still stand? Number 8, the Cheesecake Factory. It once felt like a celebration now. It's just a chandelier lighting up empty chairs. The Cheesecake Factory was the middle-class version of a fancy night out, with a massive menu of nearly 250 items, velvet seating, and iconic dessert displays. It was a must-stop for Canadians visiting the US during holidays. Families from Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver would plan weekend trips around it. In border cities like Buffalo and Burlington, Canadians made up nearly 18% of all guests, spending more than $60 per person, almost double the local average, according to a 2019 report. But by 2024, the sparkle had dulled. First quarter earnings showed a 12% drop in revenue at border locations, with table vacancy rates rising over 25% compared to 2019. On TikTok, Canadian users posted silent walkthroughs of near-empty dining rooms, calling it a museum of forgotten celebrations. One Buffalo employee said, "We used to turn people away. Now, hours pass without a single order. The reason Canada moved on. Restaurants like Jack Astor's, Moxie's, and Earl's now offer stylish interiors, full bars, and a modern feel at prices 15 to 20% lower, combined with rising anti-US sentiment following trade disputes. Many Canadians shifted their loyalty to domestic chains less about price, more about principle and trust. That was further eroded in 2022 when the Cheesecake Factory was fined for misleading financial reports. hiding pandemic losses of nearly $150 million. Inside, workers reported unpaid overtime, cut health benefits, and forced layoffs of older kitchen staff. The outrage, while muted in media, spread fast online, especially among Canadians who see food as both a value and a moral choice. Now, weekend birthdays are happening elsewhere. Retired seniors living near the border no longer have their slice of comfort. And part-time workers once sustained by weekend traffic have been let go, quietly, when even dessert starts disappearing. What flavor of America will be left? Number 9, Salt Bae. There was a time when a sprinkle of salt could make people fly across borders. Now even gold-covered steak can't distract from the silence. Nusret, led by viral icon Salt Bae, once defined luxury dining for the Instagram generation. With over 50 million followers online, the brand attracted celebrities, influencers, and middle-class dreamers alike. Locations in Miami, Las Vegas, and Beverly Hills became hotspots for Canadian tourists during holidays where dropping $275 per person felt justified for the one-time experience. Images of gold-coated tomahawk steaks once flooded Canadian social feeds. But between 2022 and 2024, the sparkle dimmed. Bloomberg reported a 22% revenue drop at the Las Vegas branch, correlating with a sharp decline in Canadian visitors. Viral posts accelerated the backlash. One Canadian family's TikTok documenting a 3-person meal costing over $1,200 and a 40-minute wait for water hit over 3 million views. The tone shifted from envy to embarrassment. The deeper shift, however, was cultural. Canadian consumers increasingly reject flamboyance in favor of authenticity. After Salt Bae interrupted the 2022 World Cup final to force a photo with Lionel Messi, media outlets across Canada criticized him as disruptive and self-absorbed. For a generation prioritizing sincerity, the act was tone-deaf. Meanwhile, domestic steakhouses like High's, The Keg, and Black Plus Blue offer refined experiences at lower prices, without theatrics. Many Canadians asked why pay double for less respect. Then came scandal. A 2023 New York Times investigation exposed labor abuses within Nusret's system: unpaid overtime, 14-hour shifts, and passport confiscation of immigrant workers. In Canada, online forums labeled the brand luxury built on exploitation. The hashtag #Don'tTipSaltBae went viral in Toronto and Vancouver. Now, the effect is visible. Staff layoffs continue, especially in U.S. branches that once relied on Canadian customers. Older Americans, who once viewed the restaurant as a celebration spot, now walk away feeling used. And weekend jobs for young Americans near the border gone. If even the glitter gets abandoned, what else can America still sell? Number 10, TGI Fridays. There was a time when stepping into Fridays felt like entering a weekend that never ended. Now, even Friday feels like Monday. In the 1990s and early 2000s, TGI Fridays was more than a restaurant, it was a cultural export. As one of the first American dining chains to expand into Canada, it became the go-to spot for everything from post office happy hours to family birthday dinners. The glowing red lights, towering cocktails, and slogan "In Here, It's Always Friday" turned it into a cross-border experience for Canadian tourists flooding cities like Buffalo, Detroit, and Seattle. At its peak, Fridays had over 900 global locations, with a substantial chunk of weekend revenue fueled by Canadian visitors. But by 2024, that buzz had dulled into silence. Only around 270 locations remain in the US, down from over 700 in 2010. According to Statista, the brand has shrunk by more than 60%. All Canadian branches, including Icons in Toronto and Vancouver, closed in 2023. The reason revenue couldn't keep up with rent, wages, or expectations. A survey by Restaurants Canada found that 74% of Canadians under 45 no longer saw Friday's food as worth the price. Many called it expensive fast food in disguise. On Reddit, one post summed up the national shift: "I used to stop by the Buffalo location every long weekend. It's closed now. I don't miss it. I've got the rec room." At the heart of this collapse is Friday's refusal to evolve. While Canadian brands like Earl's, Moxie's, and Boston Pizza reimagined casual dining, Fridays clung to deep-fried comfort food and outdated decor. Under the control of Triartisan Capital Advisors since 2014, Fridays faced further scrutiny after leaked documents exposed financial misreporting during franchise sales. and the consequences ripple. American staff near the border, once buoyed by a steady stream of Canadian weekenders, now face layoffs. Towns in states like Ohio, Michigan, and Minnesota are left with shuttered doors and dusty half-off appetizer signs. If even Friday has lost its charm, what weekend traditions are next to go? In 2025, we are not just watching restaurants close. We are witnessing the quiet collapse of shared memories, weekend traditions, and familiar comfort when Canada, once America's closest friend, quietly steps back. The ripple effect is devastating. From Red Lobster to IHOP, once crowded tables now sit in silence. And if other nations follow this silent boycott, what will remain of the places we used to rely on? This isn't just about business, it's about the slow erasure of an entire way of life. The question is, did we see it coming? Or did we ignore the silence until it was too late?